Welcome to the Paru Zings Appraisers on Purpose podcast. This podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the industry? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Welcome back. I hope you're having a good start to your holiday season here in 2023. I mean, I don't know about you, but I already see stuff in the stores about holidays before we even see Thanksgiving. And I'm like, there's a lot to be thankful for, no matter how you feel about the valuation profession at this point in time. And today I'm very thankful for our guest, Luke Tomaszewski, fabulous and very interesting individual in the profession. Before we jump into it, just a quick reminder, definitely hit the like button and type it in to the chat. Go ahead and share this out, because as we continue to expand the reach and increase the breadth, more and more people, both in the industry and those considering the industry, are really being positively impacted. I appreciate Ramona reaching out this past week, just sharing what great takeaways she got from a season 1 episode that she went back and picked up. And the same thing for Johnny, who has really kind of gotten a lot more into investing, but didn't realize there were so many more secondary opportunities for valuation of assets. So with that, we're going to jump right in. Luke, thanks for joining us.
Mike, great seeing you again.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, we love to kick it off with that opening question. So were you born this way, or how did you get into the profession?
Yeah, just one of those random ones. So nothing like, the majority of the appraisers with getting into it, via family members. So my story's completely different, where just, around high schoolish, I was doing construction, in the summers, and then college about the same thing. So had a light interest in, real estate. And then parents were refining their house. One day, had a guy walking through the property, taking photos, measurements, simply asked him who he is, what he's doing. He told me he's an appraiser. I had no idea what that was, but he explained, what he does. Yeah, no idea. So he explained it to me, what the general process is. I just thought, that sounds pretty cool. I've got a bit of an interest. And then fast forward a few years later, the Chicago Association of Realtors were offering appraiser classes. So I said, what the hell? I remember what that guy told me about it, took the classes and became a licensed appraiser back then. And then my headaches really started with, how do you get your hours? How do you find a mentor? And that was a rabbit hole.
That is quite the rabbit hole. Were you a broker at the time that you were affiliated with the Chicago Association of Realtors?
No, zero anything to do with real estate. I mean, the closest time that I had were just, the odd jobs in the summer doing construction. I was just driving down Irving Park one day, which is where one of the car offices is. And I remember in the window, they just had a piece of signage that said, sign up for appraiser classes, and caught my interest and took the course and passed the state exam. And then I had to find a supervisor, which is not easy.
Well, that's a whole different problem. Between your summer jobs and when you got into appraisal, what other work were you doing? Were you still in construction, or did you go off and join a different industry?
Oh, it was a whole thing. It was construction. I remember I sold cell phones for quite some time it was T-Mobile was quite a bit, Verizon, so all those guys. So I had, pretty deep passion for, what the cell phones could do. And, as they got smarter over the years, I always kept track of that. But yeah, it was just a lot of odd jobs until I really got into the appraisal arena, along with, school and everything.
Wow. So you sound like came into the industry like so many, took some classes. Now you're like, okay, so I passed a test. Now what? What was your answer and maybe painful experience to now what?
So, first thing was, asking my parents if they know anybody in real estate. They did not. So it was really starting from ground zero. So I took this big book called The Yellow Pages, whoever remembers that.
The Yellow Pages. I just heard somebody talking about it the other day. They're like, you mean the landing page was yellow? I'm like, no, it's probably the biggest book you've ever held.
So yeah, just called every appraisal company in Illinois, asking if they'd take me on as a trainee. The answer was no. So then I really thought about, what do the appraisers need? And, back then it was, a relationship with a mortgage broker. So I called all of them again, told them, hey, I know a lot of brokers. A lot of them said, yes, we'll hire you then. So I really had to, very quickly find some new broker friends that I did not know. So there was a lot of driving up and down, the major streets in Chicago, hopping into mortgage company offices and just telling them, hey, I'm an appraiser. Here's a $50 off coupon. Please use me. And that's how it all started.
I love it. I think that's fantastic. Talk about the persistence and talk about creativity. I mean, you invested time and effort to get the license. Now you're like, I need to do something with it. You got in front of people. I mean, people do business with people. That's such a great thing. So here you go. You call the same people back who had previously said no, and now they start saying yes to you. Good for you. That's exciting to hear. Congratulations. Did you work with multiple people at the start or just focus with one individual or one firm?
It started with one firm. Then I transitioned over to a second firm for probably the last 6 months because it was a minimum of 2 years that you needed. Had all of my own clients when we started. It was just a rough start where you've got to get your own clientele. You do the split fee with the supervisor. And then, went back to school, got the certified license when that came in, opened up my own little shop in Chicago.
Oh, congratulations. How many years after you got your first license to opening up your own business? What was that time that passed?
It was straight 2 years. So, yeah, I got the license and then the certification came right about 2 years after. And, right when that envelope came in, had to come up with a really good name. So I went with Luke's Appraisal Services, as most appraisers do.
Fantastic. It was recognizable.
Yes, and easy.
Did you start out in commercial properties, residential properties, both, neither?
Residential. Commercial, I am not that smart, so I took the easier option. I didn't want to spend too much time, digging into the numbers like you guys do.
So here you are, you're doing residential. What was it like to help people get a sense of timing? Because we have individuals who've been in the profession. I was just chatting with someone who'll be joining us this season, like 50 years in the profession. I mean, he talks about like when electricity came in. And then we have others who came in and they've only known like digital technology. Like, where was your early experiences first visiting properties and preparing appraisal reports?
I've been in it for about 18 years now. So when I started, the market was still going like this. It was, before '08, but it was really cool. I really enjoyed the start. It was, driving out the properties, measuring it with, either the tape or the wheel, collecting all that data, going back to, the office and putting the report together. And then over time, you'd see a few minor advancements with, going from the tape to a laser. Now you've got the, digital measuring via the phone, a lot of different applications. But yeah, the start was pretty simple. I mean, I literally started with a vinyl 100-foot tape. Then, one of the debates was, go with the wheel. I never liked the wheel, so I never opted in for that one. And yeah, really simple. I mean, it was literally a clipboard with a piece of paper and a mechanical pencil is how advanced that it was.
Ooh, you had a mechanical pencil. Wow. Nearly unlimited lead. That is a phenomenal thing. As an insurance adjuster once told me, when I asked him on a property we were visiting, I've invested in a ton of buildings over the years, and sometimes you have losses. And I was like, hey man, what's up with that? He goes, Michael, the pencil works in all weather.
Yes.
He goes, do you know how cold it is out here? I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like I have 2 jackets on right now. He goes, your pen may very likely not work. I'm like, oh, that doesn't happen. And sure enough, like sometime in the next week or two, like the pen just didn't work. I'm like, yes. Oh, your pencil. And I've kept the pencil ever since as a backup to the digital stuff.
Exactly.
Wow, that's fantastic. So did you, you get this experience where it sounds like you were primarily doing residential lending work then, farm work?
Exactly.
And did you travel all over the great green earth of Northern Illinois, or did you kind of stay in some particular geographies?
Really just like 6 counties in Chicagoland. So everything was pretty close, within an hour drive. So we never had to go too far. There was, a lot of properties here. I mean, we were pretty busy for the most part. I remember thinking, when I got one appraisal a week, that was great. And I thought to myself, if I got one a day, my God, would that be the goal?
Hey, it's good to have goals, start and build from there. When you early on, what particular property stood out for you where you're like, oh my goodness, either you were so excited to get to do it, or you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to measure this or appraise this property?
I mean, I remember the instructors that we had in school, they said, they loved the simple, easy cookie cutter properties. And I thought to myself, that's crazy. I want to do the big, expensive, fun mansions. They're cool to see, the big mansions that are, 10 to 15,000 square feet. You'll learn from them. And I think you need to do those just to, keep learning, to be a better appraiser. But I definitely going, a few years down the line, I completely understood what they said with, they like the easy cookie cutter because you could knock that report out quickly. But if that's all you do, you're never going to grow as an appraiser. I mean, I talk to appraisers where they really pigeonhole themselves into, I only do, 1004s. And then you ask them to do a 1025 and they have no clue, or they only do suburbs and they can't do the city. I think, especially if where the market's headed, you've got to get comfortable, get out of that comfort zone and figure out new ways to appraise in different areas that you're not too familiar with, because that's where we're headed, in my opinion. So,
yeah, that having some breadth of experience and depth in more than one area is a good insulator. So you get in the profession 18 years ago, almost 2 years to the date, you're out, you start Luke's appraisal service. And then has it always been that way? Has it changed a bit over time? Did you just stay in the 6-county region you mentioned of Northern Illinois in those first couple of years?
For the most part with the firm, yeah. For the most part, that's where we stayed. Really never expanded, out from there. HVCC hit back then. So, we lost a lot of clientele. AMCs came into play, which was nothing new. We just, those relationships expanded over time. '08 hit, a lot of foreclosure volume. That's really where the idea, fell into my head with, the proxy pick side of the company, where we were doing a lot of driving, an hour across town just to get, simple exterior photos of properties. And with the experience that I had selling cell phones back then, seeing crowdsourcing platforms like Uber and Lyft becoming a bit more popular, I just had the idea of, I'd love to pay somebody a few bucks that I know is, nearby that property just to get a photo for me. And that's really how it all started, from the REO days of just driving around and burning a lot of time going back and forth.
That completely makes sense. Up to the point that you kind of focused on crowdsourcing, was your whole focus still residential lending, or had you diversified a little out of residential lending?
No, the whole time it was just residential lending. Yeah, we really never deviated from that. Once we opened up the proxy pick side of the company a few years after that, that's when we started really exploring, different industries. So we were really just trying to solve, our initial problem, along with, our clientele of just getting photos nationally at that point for different purposes. Could be home equity lending, could be portfolio, could be default or servicing. But that's how it all really started, just from the REO side of the business. And it was just a lot of driving and thinking, there's got to be a better, quicker way to do this.
Definitely agree with you on that one. Nothing worse than having an assignment with a client. And, you respect the fact that they want to have eyes on the competing assets. And it just so happens when you're putting the report together, you're like, yeah, this one isn't it. Or I found something else. You're like, oh my gosh, where do I have to go to? Like, how long is that drive one way for that photo? I could felt the pain. I dare say that everybody listening has felt some of that pain along the way. I'm curious, one thing that you've demonstrated early on in your career is that creativity and that sense of kind of hustle and making things happen. How did you back, say when HVCC came in and, we got walloped, all of a sudden you get that phone call saying, hey, so-and-so is now your client. I'm like, no, they're not. I work with the bank. And they're like, no, not anymore. I'm like, how did you go about developing clients? And then how did you go about rebuilding the business when we had some of those significant hits?
Just like with every business that you're in, I think, like you said, beginning, it's all about the relationship. So it's just, again, creating new relationships with different people. In business, you're always going to have a new headache to deal with every day. So you just have to learn to pivot and readjust, and you'll be fine. One story that I'll always share is, in the '08 days when the REO business came, a lot of appraisers drastically struggle. We did too in the beginning, but luckily, we found that opportunity and we really quickly figured out how to do foreclosure appraisals, which really nobody did before '08. It's been a while since you had to. So really quickly to learn that. And, the REO side of the business kept us busier than what we've ever done before that. So just like, when HVCC came, it was just creating new relationships and leveraging them as best as we could for mutual benefit. And the landscape's always going to change. It'll continue to change.
Man, that's as true a statement as they come. With pre-HVCC and even after, but it sounds like you've really focused on a lot of local relationships.
We started doing a lot of conferences in the valuation space. That started creating more national contacts, and that really started opening that world up. But yeah, initially it was all local. Again, appraisal was a whole new topic to me. So just trying to figure out the local contacts, the local market, that was, step one. And then once you start, getting into the conference circuit, it really opens up your eyes to talking to the people at banks, at AMCs, the reviewers, and really learning what you do when you fill out that form and, throw a value on it. What happens after that? And that was a whole new learning curve.
Yeah, it's a big eye opener at that point. You're like, oh, you mean other people also look at this? It's like, oh, you don't even know. It's like somebody else, like the public, reading your diary. So you're like, oof, Look at that. So between the time of HVCC and 2008, before you got into the foreclosure space, I interpret from just your comment, sounds like you had started to build a bit of a team. How did that go for you?
Good. Kept expanding into other areas of the country after that. Team kept getting bigger as you're growing your business. I mean, when you start off, by yourself, you 100% rely on yourself. And I remember hiring that first employee and clients would call. You knew exactly what that client needed and you had to get comfortable to letting other people do things that you did in the past. And that took quite a bit of getting used to because the simple thought process in every founder's head is just give me the phone. I'll take care of that in, 2 minutes. I know it's going to take you 10. That kept happening. More employees kept coming on and you just have to get used to it. And at this point, that's the only way to do it. So
before leading up to the great financial crisis, how many markets were you serving? It sounds like you expanded beyond Illinois.
Yeah, we got into probably about the low 40s, right in that range. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
At that point, did you keep everyone like they worked with you and they kind of worked in their local market, or did you bring everybody on as employees, or how did you take that on? Because most people don't have the wherewithal, Luke, to accomplish what you have done just even up to 2008.
It was a mix. We had anybody that worked, internally in the office for, operational or review support was an employee. And then outside appraisers outside of Illinois, would go under that contractor basis then.
Oh, fantastic. Did you use any particular structures or protocols to kind of keep people connected, or was it just when an assignment came up in an area, you sent it to them?
No, just very simple. When the assignment came up, in the area, we'd send it to them. We'd keep the relationship close in terms of we'd keep, a small group of appraisers. We wanted to keep them engaged, understand our process, really prioritize our work. And, it didn't matter if the appraiser was, 20 minutes away in Chicago or if they were, on the other side of the country. We had a very close relationship with them where, they could call you, bounce a couple of ideas off your head where, my God, I just did this inspection and I don't know how to tackle it. And that was the really cool thing that, we still do today where if you just have, another appraiser to talk to, so, the appraisers that work solo with, no relationship, it's not a good idea. You've got to have, a couple of friends that are appraisers. And even if they don't know the answer, just talking it through the problem, you'll really come up with a solution, I think.
I heard someone say it before, and I think you just summed it up well, and that is none of us is as smart as all of us. And that ability to, like 1 + 1 = 3 or more, because something that might be shared, or, hey, I haven't done that, but I have worked on, like we just had one came up the other day, a skating rink. He's like, what's an additional use for a skating rink? Because this is not it. I'm like, we got to zoom out. Here's how, like, let's walk through this whole development of value and market analysis. He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, don't just jump right into searching the comps. Like, that's why highest and best use is so important. You gotta get that stuff done first. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. So Luke, that is phenomenal. And great to hear that you still, those relationships that you cultivated still are supportive today and helping, peers really solve complex problems and help make great decisions going forward.
Oh yeah. It makes it fun.
Oh, very much so. And so you mentioned about, hey, here's this thing called a foreclosure appraisal. The whole, hey, can we get a drive-by and you have no idea what's on the inside? And can we get some maybe short value on it, like 90-day valuation? You're like, what? That's crazy. How did you get yourself up to speed and therefore get your team up to speed? Was it Fred Flintstone, one hand on the wheel and one on the road? Or were there some other tools or techniques or training that you looked to?
You know what? It was, I think I was at a CE class somewhere, ran into a guy that, did REO appraisals ages ago. And I asked him if he'd, spend a couple hours with me, just, showing me, what an REO addendum is, how on earth do you come up with this, 30-day value. Spent a couple of hours with him. He showed me the basics, and that's always the hardest part is just, finding somebody to give you that intro course into it. Yes. And then over time, you'll figure it out. So that was really how the REO world opened up to me. And my God, was there an abundance of, default work, especially in our area of Chicago. So
yeah, sadly, Chicago was once again a leader.
Yes.
Yeah, the leader in they were fighting with New York for the top title for the longest period of time to go through a foreclosure, approaching like 700 days on a property. Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, the amount of default servicing in the Chicagoland area was, that was an eye-opener.
That it was.
So here you have this joyous experience of of taking on more work than you ever thought was possible through the REO experience, but then also dealing with the problem, which is getting photos to fulfill clients' requests. You were, having had some background, you mentioned in cell phones and being around technology. You're like, hey, this crowdsourcing thing, there might be something to it. How did this idea start to come into existence, which is now ProxyPics?
Yeah, so it really just originated from, driving out an hour across town just to get a photo. Like I said, Uber, Lyft were becoming a bit more popular. So the crowdsourcing concept was, being that much more accepted. Smartphones kept getting smarter every year with, the things that they could do. They started, putting better cameras in, GPS devices. I laugh about the days when, we had a digital camera, a separate GPS device, and a clipboard and everything. I mean, you could fit it all into, the phone now with the LiDAR sensors and everything. It's crazy. So that's how it all started. It was simply from that. And it was just an idea back then where, I have no technical background whatsoever. So it was an idea that came and went. A few years later, the idea popped back into my head where, nobody's doing it. It really seems like it would be a benefit, just our industry was, the initial thought process. A lot of positive feedback, when I, talked to a few people about it. And after that, I said, what the hell, let's try it. So we hired our first developer in California, applied for a utility patent on the technology, and we built our MVP to simply provide exterior photos nationally in 24 hours or less for a reasonable fee. Was the core concept, that we were trying to solve for.
That's phenomenal. And that you really encouraging to hear. I don't hear a lot of people in the space talk about patents. So you actually filed a utility patent.
I did. Yep. So that was a fun process all in itself.
Holy cow. Was that like brain damage or what? I mean, I know a little bit about that, but not much. That's an undertaking.
It is, yeah. Luckily, it was my first rodeo. I got a design patent a couple of years before that on something completely different. So I had a bit of insight on that side of the world.
Got it.
But I very quickly learned, the difference of a design patent, which is the literal design of something, and a utility patent, which is how the process of something works, are two very different things. So it was, a very intense process of, mapping out how everything's going to work. It was very time consuming, expensive. But it was a good exercise. You got to really go through everything on how you want the application to work, what problems it will solve. So it was a good experience in that regard. But yes, it definitely hurt my head doing it, and it took some time.
Well, I'd say inquiring minds want to know. So you'd previously been involved around the patent space. What type of design patent had you applied for?
Totally different business. It was called the meter of beer back then. So a long time ago in college. I mean, we did a trip to Europe.
Sure.
Instead of ordering, pitchers and buckets of beer, they have something called a meter of beer, and you put it was 10 highball glasses in there, and we fell in love with the idea. We, built a few here and sold them to some bars locally and got a design patent on it. And that was one of those businesses that, didn't go as well as we wanted it to. And that's what you got to get comfortable with is, starting something and being comfortable with failure. So that was one of those.
I love that. Taking a college point of appreciation and turning it into an opportunity.
Yep. So that's what it was.
That is amazing. So what prompted you to consider getting a utility patent versus just coming up with an idea and starting to develop it?
Really, before we got it out into the market, we just wanted to make sure, I thought it was, a great idea that, a lot of people would try to follow on with. So we figured, let's get that utility patent. It should really cover us as much as possible. So it was just protection at the end of the day. So instead of, going out publicly at first, we, found an attorney, worked with our developer and just putting all the pieces together. So it was really, when we do release this publicly, we're at least covered because I'm sure, there's going to be a lot of competition, people with deeper pockets than, me starting the company. So that was the core concept behind it is let's just get the paperwork done and then we could comfortably, move on this. The nice thing with patents is you can do something called a provisional patent. That's a really easy, inexpensive one. And that gives you about a 1-year runway to start on the, pricier, more intense one, which is the utility. So it lets you at least start on the idea to have it protected beforehand.
That's fantastic. And what great experience you're sharing there. That a lot of people probably don't even know about the difference between a provisional patent versus stepping up to a design patent versus getting into a utility patent, the potential insurance that provides. And also ultimately is a validation potentially for your MVP, but the MVP ultimately is supported by the market response more than anything else.
Yes.
That's phenomenal. How long did it take to, I take it you succeeded in getting the utility patent. How long was that whole process?
Yeah, we did. Maybe a year and a half, right in that range, total process time. So you'll get your provisional, which is a quick, easy one to get. That really gives you a year's worth of protection, but you have to start the paperwork for the utility or design within that 1 year time frame. Otherwise, it lapses out. So I think we were all in just when we started the utility, just over a year, maybe into a year and a half is how long the process took.
Holy cow. And did you pull out your meter of beer at that point and celebrate? I mean, is that how this goes?
No, I think, those things are, just sitting in the garage at that point. And yeah, we forgot about that.
Oh, no, just keep moving on at that point. Oh, that is
exactly.
So as you're working through this idea for solving the frustrating experience that you were having and considering the crowdsourcing piece, how'd you get this going early on? I mean, granted, you used it for yourself, I assume. I don't know that, but is that accurate? That it was just like, hey, us and our little team, and we're gonna kind of make this work?
Sort of, it was us and the little team. The headache that we ran into was a lot of the clients that we were talking to, a lot of the lending institutions. My initial idea was, let's just roll this out regionally to make it easy, because what we were building was a two-sided marketplace, which is really hard to build.
Okay.
So we wanted to, start off regionally, let's just say in Illinois, build up the data collectors, which are the proxies, the people taking the photos, and then the clientele at the same time. A lot of our clients said, you either roll out nationally or we simply don't.
Oh,
wow. So it was a painful start. So it probably took us a good 2 years, I'd say, to build up the, panel nationally well enough. So that was the headache there. A good 2 years to build it up there.
That's quite a challenge. How did you, again, you mentioned two-sided marketplace for those that are not in technology. It's never easy to build up a platform. It's really difficult to build up a two-sided marketplace. It sounds, and from the experience of those probably listening in, a lot easier to step out to clients that have a lot of potential volume and get the clientele side. They acknowledge there's a need, there's a potential interest. It opens up ideas to, wow, what else could we accomplish that we can't do right now? But how do you go about building up the other side? Whereas you need in this case, proxies to go take those photos.
Yeah, it's not easy. You've got to build both at the same time. I mean, if we just approached it from, let's get the clients and they start ordering, if we don't have the proxies in the field to fulfill those, orders quickly, we fail on the client side. And it was the exact, same story. If we just got the data collectors and we didn't give them any work within about a 1 week time span, we noticed, they download the app and a week later they delete it. So, acquiring those users, had a cost associated to it. And then when they delete the app and we'd lose them, it was just a pure loss for the company. So we really had to get, strategic on, one, how do we get the clientele? And two, how do we, keep the data collector and get them work in that region? So it was a brutal 2 years of, consistently getting work and getting data collectors, because we might get an order in, Chicago today, and tomorrow it might be middle of nowhere, New Mexico, and you don't have any data collectors there. So we had to get very strategic in, how we acquired users, how we kept them.
What were some of those early steps you took to strategically get in front of people to help you? Because I remember when you guys were first starting, I was like, hey, that's a great idea. I think I was one of those that downloaded the app and then tried it once or twice, but never really got much traction with it because we had a bigger team. Most of the stuff we needed, we'd have somebody on the team just go take care of it. But I can totally appreciate that national piece. How'd you get through that first, year? Because that was impressive. A lot of companies don't live through that.
It was hard. So really, what we had to do is, you hear of people saying, we burned money. We literally had to burn money where, if we had regions where we had new data collectors that did not see a job for, that 1 week, we would have to create, jobs that nobody needed for 123 Main Street. pay them for, taking a photo of a property to keep them engaged and happy until we actually had a client that requested a real paying job in that area. So it was really just, standing up the market with the data collectors and creating, a need for jobs that really didn't exist. So the term of burning money really happened for about 2 years with us. So it was a crazy point for the company.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And was it, given that crazy point and those challenges you were up against, what were you able to utilize your existing appraisal business as a way to help build this one up? Or did you have to go out and raise capital, or were you just, working a side job, crowdfunding or crowdsourcing Uber travel to help raise some income? And because these are wonderful things people think about, but then they get stuck on the how, and you overcame the how.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just, luckily, the appraisal business was doing well. So, we took, all of that money invested into ProxyPix at that point, along with, just personal money, and never rose, any outside funding, and just bootstrapped it, as they called it, and kept going.
That is spectacular. So from what was your first, call it product, service, if you will, that you delivered? Was it an app, it sounds like? The two-sided app?
Yep. Okay. So just a very simple app where it gave you the capability to create a new request, being, an exterior photo, and you could go, specific. It's a front photo or rear photo, whatever that might be. And then, tapping, any users within a close proximity would get a ping notification saying, hey, nearby job available. You look at it, you accepted a 4-hour timer would turn on, and they simply go there, take the, capture the required photos in the app, hit complete, and we pay you the next day. And that was, the simple MVP just for exterior photos. And that was it.
Yes. Got it. And then how long did you stay at that exterior photo level? Because I know you've gone beyond that. So just to kind of give people a sense, things have advanced significantly. But just give a sense of how this was evolving, because anybody who's done appraisal work in any capacity can very much relate to these steps that you are doing or having compensation for other people to complete.
Of course. Probably a good, 3 years into it, we started expanding outside of, simple exterior photos, where we started offering, photos not just on residential. We went into commercial. We went into, the interiors of properties, all the way into, very unique things where it opened up, new verticals into new industries for us, where people said, could you get photos at night for us? And that was something new that we never thought of, and new feature that needed to be built into the app. So it really opened up that world from, where the initial idea started to solve an appraisal problem, into some new verticals now.
So before you get into solving the new verticals, was it because it was an app? Is this primarily, like I think about, you mentioned LiDAR today and the ability to pull out a digital device, and all these devices now are in the palm of your hand versus carrying a bag, if you will, or a briefcase and a bunch of other tools in it. Was this something as simple as they would just need an iPad or an iPhone? Because again, a lot of people are not familiar yet with ProxyPix. I have a hunch. I won't call it the Oprah bump, but there's a possibility here, Luke, that there could be a huge surge in availability for ProxyPix because of it. But share a little bit about how someone interacts with the technology.
Very simple. So it's a native app for both Android and iOS. And we keep the process as simple as possible. So if you need to request photos, if it's an individual user, you simply create an account on the website and put that request in. You could say, get me a front photo of 123 Main Street, or we have, different templates to pick from. So, if you ought to take a deeper dive, we do the PDR and the PDC inspection for the GSEs, and that's a deep dive, into the interior typical data that the appraiser collects.
Yes.
So very simple to create a request for the larger enterprise clients. They come in through an API call typically, where they never go into our system. They sit within, their loan operating system or whatever they have, and they push the request back to us. So that's all through an API. And then, from the user standpoint for the data collector, it's very simple. We've kept it as simple as possible. You could take photos, and it could be as simple as, still image, Recently, we've rolled out something called a 360, where you really take 8 photos together in a rotation. We stitch those together, and you feel like you're there on site. We have, video capabilities, custom questionnaires, but we keep it really simple to where, if we have, photos or questions about the exterior of the property, you do those first, and then you'll hop into the interior section. So we try to make it as efficient as possible. So you're not, taking the, let's say, front photo, then you're going inside to get the furnace photo. Now I need a photo of the AC. I got to go back outside. So when we build these out, we want to make it as efficient as possible. So when our data collectors in that property, be commercial or residential, they're out of there as soon as possible, not to inconvenience the homeowner or the manager on site, whoever it might be. So we've made it very simple with the questionnaire. It works. It's conditional. So if you answer a yes to damage, now we'll ask you to take photos to document the damage. If there's no damage, move on to the next question. So we make it really simple. So if it's your first time completing an order, you'll do a great job because it's so easy to follow.
That's fantastic. Are you still growing both sides of the business presently?
Both sides, yeah. So we, luckily today, we don't have to pay for any advertising to gain new data collectors today.
Congratulations.
Luckily, it's a lot of word by mouth now. So anybody that completes a job, they're typically really happy to know how easy the process is, how quickly we pay them. They typically tell their friends about it. So that's how we're getting new users on the data collection side. And then from clientele, it's everything from, just cold sales calls to conferences to everything else in between.
That's all word of mouth is always a wonderful way to help grow the business. What, especially in today's environment, there's a lot of people out there that maybe don't have as much work as they used to have. And this might be a way that they could supplement it. What might someone, if they're in a market that's relatively populated, where there's some interest, can they earn a couple $100 extra bucks a month, or is it like they're like one of those YouTube advertisers where you're going to earn like $10,000 if you just invest a little bit of money? What's the sense so that you can continue to grow your sided market for the earning?
It's a wide range. Every year we're getting, more people that we have to issue, 1099s to. We've seen people, some of the highest paying users have made, $40,000 to $50,000, for the year. And that's, for a side gig, that's not bad.
Great side gig.
And, the more that you do with us, the better. When you download the app, you'll simply qualify for the most basic assignments, which are, simple exterior photos from public property. But if you take some of the training courses, you do the background check, if you have a state credential like real estate or an appraisal, a home inspector license, we have certain clients that, state that they could only, we could only assign orders to somebody that holds a state credential. So again, the population decreases, so you'll have, more availability for those jobs. Those are typically higher paying jobs. So the more you build that profile with us, the more income you'll make. It's very easy.
I appreciate you taking the time to provide that answer, not just for our listeners, which I think is really insightful, but I do get a lot of calls from people asking like, hey, can you introduce me to somebody, or is there an opportunity? I've known you, I've known about your company, but I really didn't know that level of detail. I will gladly point them in that direction. A lot of people reach out to me from across the country, and because they know that we, although like you, we don't just work in Chicago, we work in a number of major markets. They're like, hey, can I join you? And a lot of times the answer maybe is not right now, but not no. And this is like, hey, here's something else though, so you can at least stay closer to the industry as opposed to just sitting at home. That is exciting. Well, I'm going to ask a question that most people are not aware of yet, but I will, and that is, how many of the new markets that you're in were your idea versus clients that came to you, or I should say prospects that came to you and said, can you do this? Was it mostly you or was it mostly them?
It was 100% them. The first one was a signage company out of Florida where they said, hey, could you get photos of, JP Morgan Chase locations? And, we simply said, give us, an address and tell us what photos you want. And we could do that. So that was our first venturing into, the commercial facility build. And I think three months later, they said, you're doing really good. We want photos at night now.
Oh, fascinating. And for those of you that don't understand signage and visibility, what would be a typical reason why a signage company would want to see the image, and then they would want to see it at night?
So really the reasoning behind, that request for, the Chase locations was that Chase always wants to make sure that the illumination on their signage isn't only working, but it's illuminated to the level that it should be. So that's when we actually had to build in, these specific time frames into our application where you could take a photo between this and this time frame. So that was a whole new world for us. So again, we had to build the new feature into the app. It was something different for the data collectors to get used to, but that was, the intro into that side of the world that we knew nothing about. And that was, the second vertical that really started for us for the facility management side of the sector.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think one thing you mentioned early on, which I really appreciate, Luke, is that you had some curiosity around the appraisal, not just being for the loan officer, maybe the mortgage company that you walked into and struck up a relationship with and said, hey, here's $50 off your first appraisal if you send us some work. And then, hey, I can go do some more work with some supervisors and learn my way up. But understanding that there's so many other constituents in real estate transaction and then just real estate in general. And what I appreciate is that so much of your growth, although it started with one solution, the solution actually serves many different potential users, the vast majority of which many people in appraisal have probably never thought about. But one thing we had mentioned previously, and I was just, we do a lot of work in the asset-backed space. And so you had mentioned about validation of assets was a story you had shared. Would you mind sharing that? You don't need to disclose any names because we don't want anybody getting in trouble because somebody wasn't doing what they were supposed to. But share how your services helped someone validate a tough situation they were dealing with.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. Again, just a random client that reached out to us that had a problem, wanted to see if we could solve it. So the summary of that one is it was a lender on the private side, not real property, where they lent a couple of $1 million for several thousand vending machines that were supposed to be deployed to a few thousand locations, and after 90 days they felt something was off because none of the vending machines were generating any revenue. So when they reached out to the person that borrowed that money, they said, vending machines are deployed. They simply don't know what's going on. So they asked us to go out to these locations, get photos of all the vending machines. They weren't sure if maybe they weren't working, not plugged in, what the issue is. We completed all few thousand locations within under 48 hours, got them the photos back, and we really thought, what did we screw up? Because every photo that we returned did not have a vending machine.
Oh, no. Oh, geez.
So our initial thought is, we did something wrong. So we got on, we sent the, request to the client, had a quick call with them, explained, hey, let us know what we did wrong. There were no vending machines on site. They circled back a few days later with us and really thanked us for the service. They said we confirmed what they thought had happened. The person that lent the money never deployed the vending machines. And this was a way to say, now we know they've been sitting in a warehouse instead of being deployed and generating revenue. So one of those case uses that I never foresaw that, we'd solve a problem like that, but it was really cool to hear about.
No, that is, for those that are in the secured space, private lending, there's such a huge industry. Like we you and I, and many of those listening, have taken the time, taken the courses, become certified professionals in valuation. But there's so many types of assets that get valued. I mean, we just happen to talk real estate an awful lot, but there's machinery and equipment, and there's inventory, and there's art, and there's intellectual property. I mean, there's so many different types of assets out there. And somebody at some point in time may need to put a set of eyes on it. And that's what I'm understanding and appreciating that ProxyPix is doing.
Yes.
Wow.
Exactly.
What are some of the more interesting current client opportunities that you're working on that people that are associated with ProxyPix may have an opportunity to help deal with and get compensated for?
Yeah. So it's a wide array. I mean, it'll go from the, simplest option of, exterior photos of residential and commercial. It could be, for lending purposes to make sure that the house is still standing, down to commercial to, verify that the commercial vendor is maintaining, landscaping, or a painting company that's trying to, bid out a new project, or a, asphalt company that's trying to get measurements on a new parking lot to bid that out, down to, national flooring companies leverage us to go inside of locations, get photos and measurements of the floor plans so they don't have to send their contractors out for square footage, all the way down to, what we do in appraisal world for, a deep dive into data collection, where we're collecting about 150 data points on the property with, in addition to photos, a floor plan, and now, the newest vertical being insurance that we recently got into, and that'll be, similar for, simple as an extra photo for a new policy, down to a deep dive for a claims policy if a, roof caves in due to a tree falling on it, and you documenting either the damage or the repairs. So lots of different ways to, do work for us, and 3 verticals that we're in now.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about that, amongst not only the diversity, and some offline conversations we've had, there's significant growth in that space for you, is that many of those also have some amount of valuation that goes on. And like you said at the beginning, you just did residential lending work. There's so much more, and we've heard from a number of people here in this season that there's so much more valuation work that goes on than just origination, or if you will, a loan for a purchase. And, whether it's in-place valuation, whether it's, mark to market, whether it's, diminution in value, damage, you name it. That's such a fascinating focus that you've got there, Luke.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll keep expanding too, I'm sure. New ideas will come as clients have a need for it.
That is definitely the case. And it's such a great experience here, where so many people at some point, maybe in their life or in their professional career, have had that frustrating experience. Like, man, it shouldn't be this way. Man, I can't believe there's not a solution. And in your case, there wasn't. And you're like, well, let me see what I can do. And you went out and started to solve a problem that you were experiencing, and then other people were already challenged by it. So they also, in this case, saw the need and the benefit of it. And it's wonderful to see that something that started with a client request for comparable photos has turned into what Proxy Picks is today. And you're still so young in your growth and have so much opportunity ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. Long runway ahead of us. So we're just getting started on this side.
Fantastic. So as you look out over the next 3 to 5 years, and we'll kind of keep it maybe a little more tailored in the question towards real estate and valuation services, what are you most interested in or optimistic about from your perspective at Proxy Picks?
So lots of changes coming down the pipeline for us as appraisers. I think that's going to be the most exciting thing. I definitely, joke around about it with, some appraiser friends where, within the past 18 years of, my career as an appraiser, the biggest change that I've really gone through is going from a tape measure to a laser. And that's sad. We should have had a lot more advancements since then.
Yes.
So lots of changes to come. I mean, we're all hearing about the new appraisal forms coming out, the different ways of data collection happening, how the appraiser's job may potentially change. I think what will be interesting is now, everybody's really starting to talk about and accept, new technologies into the valuation space. Where I think we're really going to go is I think the appraisers will change to, more of a valuation analyst, where the data, for the subject property, the physical data will be provided to us. Could be, via a data collection company, could be, per the homeowner or the borrower. I know a lot of different topics are being explored, at this time. We heard a lot, from people at the MBA, where that side's continually evolving. The one thing that I do know is, if we do run into another hiccup like we did in, 2020, where, sometimes an appraisal would take, 60 plus days or just simply never get fulfilled. I know, there will be, steps to, get the appraiser out of the process. So really what we're building is to make the appraiser that much more capable, so we don't run into those, bottlenecks that we did 2 years ago. Because at the end of the day, if somebody can't obtain a mortgage or, purchase a home due to just simply not being able to get an appraisal if it's in a rural market, that needs to get solved. Otherwise, us as appraisers will feel those consequences. So I think if we could solve, the problems up front, and, the easiest scenario that I like to share, if it's a rural area where there's, one appraiser for 10 counties, let's get that data for the appraiser now. Let's do the data collection on their behalf. And if we provide that data to them within a few days and they can, knock everything out from there, it solves that futuristic problem of, not enough appraisers in specific areas.
Yeah, I really respect your perspective on that. And, I think if we just look back for anyone who at some point, maybe earlier in life, took some classes, maybe one of them was statistics, and whether you liked statistics or didn't, it's all about accuracy of a larger data set based on a sample size. And you have to figure out where the value is. And the people who can really harness results from analyzing data do really well. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I think back to when I graduated from school and I started getting part-time jobs and what have you, and look and see what people made then and look at what people make now. Of course, they make more now generally, but those that have data abilities, they make many, many multiples more than the typical people finishing up some school. So I commend your perspective. Definitely commend your perspective. Well, Luke, we are so excited to have you as a guest here in this season, and for you to share what started out as a frustration has turned into a source of solutions, not only for your peers. Like you said, you've got some people that are really in this, earning a very healthy part-time income, but also for clients and creating solutions by solving futuristic problems. Really appreciate the contribution that you're making in the industry.
No, thanks, Mike. Always a good time chatting with you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Well, as we bring this fascinating and insightful conversation to a close, definitely remember to continue to share this out. And we look forward to a little foreshadowing. We've got an upcoming season that's going to be heavily technology focused. We're already excited to have Luke back for that future season. But for the time being, thank you for joining us for another episode of Perusings, The Power of Values. And until then, stay healthy, stay safe, and hey, in this case for Luke, go take some photos. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusings, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing life paths and achievements of our guests. Don't forget to like us on LinkedIn and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusings, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.